Okay, JFY Networks is a nonprofit organization that started out in Boston in 1976, the bicentennial year, originally as Jobs for Youth. And the mission of the agency was to help high school dropouts find jobs. The program was what was called at the time job readiness, which consisted of kind of a light behavioral training, how to dress properly, how to get to work on time. But then it also involved filling out applications and writing resumes, and that got us into academic skills, because high school dropouts had the problem of not having very good academic skills. So we began to do tutoring, and then by the middle 80s, we were running a GED program, helping kids actually get a high school diploma. In the course of running the GED program, we developed an instructional technique that at the time we called competency-based instruction. What that meant was, if you were running classes that were geared to the GED, which is a national test, you knew pretty much what was on the GED. It was not that different from year to year. There were 5 tests, and you had a pretty good idea of what was going to be covered on the GED. So you could design a curriculum that led to what you knew it was going to be on the test. That was called competency-based. If you demonstrated each small competency on the way to learning what you needed for the test, then you were going to be ready for the test. So we developed a complete curriculum geared to the GED test called the at the time it was the Jobs for Youth competency-based GED curriculum. And then we ran GED courses for many years. We also did a lot of job training that also had to do with particular skills. And then just to fast forward a bit, we come to just about the year 2000, when education reform in Massachusetts had kicked into gear. The MCAS was being given. The new federal education law was just about to come into effect. And what was driving the discussion about education reform in 2000 was the MCAS and the low scores on the MCAS that were common throughout the state. There were failure rates in those years, 98, 99, 2000. There were failure rates of 98% in many schools on the MCAS. So it was clear that the new standards that the state had adopted, which were not considered high, not considered outlandishly high, many schools were not teaching up to the level of those standards. We had an experiment that we were running right at that time with instructional technology, using software to raise reading and math skills. We applied that technology and that technique to MCAS preparation in a couple of experimental schools, and we found that it was very effective, that you could run a course using software, and because of the structure of the software, because it was organized in small units of information, modules, which 20 years ago in the GED program we used to call competencies, and because it was modularized, and it gave students instant feedback after each module. You would work for 20 minutes, and then you'd take a little mastery test. So you'd find out immediately whether you had mastered the material or not. If you hadn't mastered it, you went back and you went through it again. A different set of problems, different set of applications, until you were able to pass the mastery test. If you were in a classroom with a teacher, the teacher would come over and help you out. So it was a nice way of, first of all, presenting instruction in a way that was interesting, because it was online. It had color, it had sound, it had some interactive properties. You could drag and drop, you could stretch your triangles out and all that kind of interactive functionality. So it was interesting to the kids. It was aligned to the state standards. It covered the material that you were going to be held responsible for, and you got instant feedback. And the teacher got instant feedback. So if you were teaching the class and you looked at those reports at the end of the day, you knew exactly which student had mastered everything, which student had not, exactly what each student had not mastered and needed to go over. So it was that kind of process is called formative assessment. You want to know day by day how your students are doing so that you can make your corrections as you go along. You don't want to wait 6 weeks, give a quiz, and then find out that some of your kids have not been getting it for 6 weeks. All right, so those are the basic, that's the basic structure of online education. So we began to do that in various schools. We got some state funding. We expanded to a lot more schools, including this one and the high school down the road. And of course, then our repertoire expanded. The first few years we were just doing a MCAS math and English using some standard software. As web-based material began to get more common and more affordable, we began to use that. And within, if we started about 2000, by a couple of years ago, we were largely on the web. We were using Moodle, which is a learning management system. It's kind of a basket into which you can put whatever you want. And we were assembling an eclectic mix of instructional materials. Okay, so online instruction, which we've been observing today and which you've heard a number of people talk about, online is where kids are. This is the digital generation. If you have kids who are 12 or 13 or 14 or even 5 or 6 years old, or if you observe kids who are anywhere in their preteens, teens, or post-teens, you know that they are online all the time. It's their primary interface with the world. It's the way they get information. It's the way they tell what time it is. They don't look at a watch. They pull out their cell phone and look at the time. They're online. That's where their attention is. If you want to teach them geometry or algebra or U.S. history, the first thing you have to do is to get their attention. If their attention is online, why wouldn't you approach them the same place where they're accustomed to go for every kind of information? So the first principle of online education is that's where your kids are. Why don't you address them there? That's one reason why it's becoming more widespread. Then you get to the second level of considerations about online instruction, which has to do with the fact that every student learns differently. Every mind is different. Every sensibility is different. A textbook presents material in one way. If that does not happen to speak to a particular kid, well, then you've lost that kid. Why wouldn't you want to be in an instructional environment where you have 5, 6, 7, 8, or a dozen different ways of presenting the same material, so that if this doesn't work with this particular student, you got option B, you got option C, you've got option D. That is the way that kids are accustomed to dealing with information, but it's also the way that you can get their attention and the way that you can present it in the way that they need to have it presented. So you have lots of options if you're online. Well, now that leads to another problem, though. There's a million pieces of software online. There's a million math programs. There's hundreds of thousands of apps. I mean, how many apps are there for the iPhone? Hundreds of thousands. Thousands of different options for instructional software. There's two questions. How do you know which ones are the best? How do you know whether they're correct or not? How do you know they're not saying 2 + 2 = 6? And then, how do you know that they're aligned to the standards that you're supposed to be teaching to? Every state now has a set of standards. There's a new set of national standards coming along in a couple more years. You aren't just teaching whatever you want to teach in your classroom. You have a set of standards, a body of material that you're held responsible for covering. If you're going to be teaching whatever your subject is, you want to make sure that you're teaching material that fits into the standards, that gets you where you want to go. Well, you're a classroom teacher. Do you have time to be out on the web looking at the latest geometry software from MIT or the latest English software from wherever, from Harvard, finding out what's the best the best recent material, making sure that it does fit into the standards, deciding where it goes. Is it N1.6? Is it 10N6? Is it 10N8? Is it 10R8? Where does it fit into the curriculum? Do you have time to do that? The answer is probably no. You wish you did, but you don't. All right, so you have all these practical problems. When we come into a school, as we work in this school, what we bring to the school is we bring a set of tools that enables the teacher to do the most effective job that she can do. Right now, we're at a point in the discussion of public education in the United States where teachers have become the scapegoats. Education reform in the U.S., of course, goes back a long time, back to Thomas Dewey. We've always been in a state of debate about public education. A big wave started in 1957, right after Sputnik. A big wave started in '83 after A Nation at Risk. Another in Massachusetts, it was '93 with the education reform law. Then it was 2002 and No Child Left Behind, and now it's Race to the Top. Every few years or every decade, there's another wave of education reform. Right now, the level of discussion is it's the teacher's fault. This is partly related to economic issues and public union contracts, but for the last couple of years, we've been blaming the teachers for not getting their kids up to the level that they're supposed to be at. One of the penalties under No Child Left Behind, one of the penalties for non-performing schools is that the school is required to fire the principal and half the teachers. This is a kind of an odd and arbitrary way of dealing with educational problems in a school, but firing half the teachers is supposed to fix whatever's wrong with that school.